This is the gathering of members of the Old School Drinking Podcast. You might ask why you're doing a new podcast considering the millions that exist. Our goal is simple: to encourage people to gather in neighborhood bars and talk. Talk not only to people who agree with you, talk to people who think you're an idiot. Understand that the only way we will survive as a society is if we can get beyond our various camps and identities. This is why we're here, to save an institution that historically brought us together. Also, we like to drink. Today we're at the Oasis Bar in Roger Park. Co-hosts are John and Joe. And we have several guests that are going to join us later that will come in.
Ditch out because I'm a coward.
Nah.
Anyway.
Because our equipment is is in a position that's a little
this is a work in progress.
Exactly.
We had a few more guests than expected because we did not communicate well, but it worked out okay.
It did.
I think.
And I appreciate John in this case. Again, talk about why you were a little late.
Oh, I was doing my civic duty. I got to go to jury duty today. Let me tell you, great freaking time.
What
California Avenue.
What sort of case?
Oh
God!
Oh, it was a murder case. It was really actually. Like, I got to be honest. Part of me wanted to get selected just so I could say that I got to be a juror on a murder case.
I've actually been on it.
Most of me said I don't want to be responsible for these two people ending up in prison for the rest of their lives. And it was
how close was it?
Conflict,
how close was it?
But I don't know. I didn't get to the point where I knew anything about the case. I just spent the entire day in jury selection.
I know, but were you sitting in the jury box and then they pulled you out? Yeah,
well,
then it was
actually,
close.
they put us through. There were like 50 of us. We got through 40, and then they called it at like 5 o'clock, and it was a whole thing.
The infamous voir dire.
The criminal prosecution system in America is so fucked, but it's the best one we got.
Yes.
And I would not want to streamline it because that just makes it worse.
So what are you drinking tonight?
Well, I am having a daisy cutter again because the ESB has not yet been completely set up. I just put it on with Ben while you were talking later in the show because we're doing a little cut thing because the main conversation got recorded first and we're doing this after because jury duty. But the ESB is tapped. It still needs to be bled. When I'm done with this, I'm going to have an ESB.
I will have one too.
You can taste it.
I will have one
too. Whether or not you want to have an entire one. So I'm not wasting a whole perfectly good ESB on you if you don't actually like it.
You're not wasting anything on me? What a man. Anyway, let's talk about news a little bit. How about some hyper-local news?
Hyper-local, I see you got a couple of good spots down here. Yes, as somebody who drives down Luntz on a regular basis, what a pain in the ass. I kind of wish they just blocked off the street and just said, "Hey, don't come this way
until we pave it." Until we pave it.
Serpentine around multiple construction crews just to try to get far enough west so they get far enough south. This morning,
it's interesting because when they strip the not the concrete, but the asphalt down, you have problems then with manholes and things like that being real problems.
It gets fun.
The reason I put that down as something to talk about is the fact that you can say a lot of things about Chicago, but a lot of things work.
Well,
they fix things.
I've always said this is the city that works. It doesn't work cheap. It doesn't work fair, but it does work.
Yeah.
Anyway, we do actually have a great streets in San.
Yes, I think they're. The thing I marvel on are the sidewalks. The sidewalks are better than any city I've ever seen. That's a little loud, isn't it?
Yeah, but we'll deal with it.
Okay.
Real fast, anyway.
Second thing I wanted to talk about was Alexander.
Well, they took the sign down.
Yeah.
But I've seen activity going on in the restaurant for the first time in months.
This is a restaurant that is catty-corner to us on Pratt and Sheridan. We are also on the corner of Pratt and Sheridan also. And there's been a sign up for how long? A long time.
Almost 2 years.
A long
Almost
time.
2 years.
And we all are waiting for it because it is a very good lunch and breakfast place.
It's an okay lunch and breakfast.
But
again, I was hoping you would open up so I could eat there.
Again, I think that it's troubling from the standpoint that you don't know whether it's a business problem or a problem with permits and business licenses and things like that.
We have no idea.
So we can't really complain too much about that. On the local news in general, that's not hyper local news. We had the No King stuff this weekend, and my wife and I went down to it. It was a great time. There was no even negativity. No one was angry. Everyone was relatively happy. It was just showing people that we cared about what was going on. We care about our brothers and sisters that are being attacked right now. And
they were prestigious guests. Ask us in 20 minutes. Unless you want to come over here and sit if you want to join.
So I think that there was a hope on the federal government that something bad would happen, that there would be all sorts of problems.
There were a bunch of people hoping that there would be chaos and have a reason to send in the troops.
And I salute the Chicago PD. They were there in force, but they were not wearing any riot gear or anything like that. They were in a position
the
that they were
with the riot equipment were standby and on ready if they needed to come out. But this is Chicago PD. They know what the hell they're doing. They've been through worse. And I gotta be honest. I know a lot of cops, and most of them are terrible. But I'll trust the Chicago cop over any other town cop or city cop that I've ever been to and ever met.
Okay, another thing on local news, which is sort of not local news, is I want to talk about the fact that statistics are weird. And what I mean by that is I was looking on the YouTube.
Yeah.
And one of the things that came up was that New York City is both the richest and one of the poorest cities in the country.
Sure.
It is the richest from the standpoint it has so many millionaires and billionaires. It is the poorest because it has so many people that are living below the poverty line.
Yep.
Now, how is this justification possible in the richest country in the world is a question I have. And it is an indictment of the capitalist system that we have in place right now that flows to the top away from poor people.
It doesn't flow, it gets sucked. A flow is a natural progression. None of this is so yeah, I would say it's definitely a critique of the fact that late stage capitalism leads the vast majority of people in its clutches into poverty. Absolutely.
So
$20 says Tom played this song.
It could be. The next thing we wanted to talk about was the Unabomber was back in the news again.
Oh yeah. Thank you for sending that article over. And it's been a while since I thought about him, but his tactics I always disagreed with. His social commentary made a decent amount of sense when I first read it.
And that's part of the problem with people that have mental illness problems is that they can make a lot of sense in situations. we talked about Nietzsche at one point and what his circumstance was.
Yeah, he was also crazy.
But perceptive in ways that a lot of other people aren't.
He was also accused of being all sorts of things that he personally wasn't latched onto for.
Well, that's another whole matter that we will talk about in depth sometime.
We could bring in a buddy of mine who studied Nietzsche for his PhD.
In case people don't know what we're talking about, since we've talked around it, there was an article in PC Magazine about the situation with the Unabomber's manifesto that was printed and what it warned about the technological arc that we are on right
Basically,
now.
The total obliteration of privacy, the easy control of influence of news and data, information flowing from central sources out to everyone, censorship. What else am I missing?
Not much.
Okay.
That's fine. Just so we understand.
Telling us that we're going to end up in a digital hellscape that we're now in.
Which is part of the problem we're seeing, especially with the fact that our executive has basically figured out that we need to not do anything about AI for 10 years.
Oh, no, it's easier just to govern by AI meme generation. Yeah. What else we got?
Well, we could talk about either Comey or the Bondi Senate testimony. Which would you like?
Well, so the blatantly obvious retribution lawsuit, or the woman who got up and just played Mean Girl in front of Congress and didn't actually answer any questions.
Well, I think,
why was she not held to contempt of Congress? Because Congress is still told to do.
Well, to be in a position that Comey is being basically accused of lying in front of Congress, and then Bondi came on and lied in front of Congress.
No, she didn't lie.
I thought there were several things that she said that were untrue.
She didn't lie. She just didn't answer the question.
Sometimes
she may have said things that were untrue, but they were not things she would question about. She was tap dancing really effectively. And is she a terrible human being? Yes. Is Comey a jackass? Yeah. Should he have been fired a long time prior?
Well,
personally, I would say yes. Does he deserve to go to jail because he leaked some information after the president pressured him in a very, very, what's the word? Unethical way?
Yes.
Yeah. But again, these are all terrible people, and they should have all been disposed of. But we don't live in a society where we solve things with a guillotine. Yeah.
No, and in a lot of ways, it's the thing that's crazy is Comey actually was probably the main reason that Trump was elected the first time.
Yeah.
If he had not slipped that Hillary was under investigation within a week of the election, the likelihood that he would have won.
It would have been a closer race at best. There were a bunch of people who were like, what about her emails? Well before the Comey announcement. But the fact that he pulled the October surprise and it came from the DOJ, pretty sketchy.
Yeah.
And I understand if he was trying to, play it like, I'm nonpartisan. Well,
no, I thought when it happened,
as far as I'm concerned, he's kind of getting his comeuppance now.
Yeah.
And I kind of don't feel bad for him, but I don't like the precedent, and I don't like the fact that we have these blatantly obvious, weaponization of the law from a fuckhead, pardon my language,
someone that's looking for
ran
enemy.
on weaponization of the law. It's like, no, okay, so everything that you say you're going to stop, you're going to turn around and do. Fantastic.
Well, and it just plays into the spite thing that we talked about a little earlier that is going to be after.
You're going to be talking about in a few minutes because time travel.
Yeah. So why don't we talk about early bars? Because I think one of the things I'd like to do is actually matriculate to an early bar sometime. Because I was looking at a series of discussions in New York City about early bars.
Okay.
And they're interesting.
I want to point out this does not qualify as a bar story.
No.
However, we're going to skip the bar story this week, and we'll talk about early bars.
Yep, that would be great. And
go ahead.
That's I think basically where we are, and we're going to now have a big discussion on Chicago Under Siege. And
no. What was the early bar thing?
Well, no, from a cultural standpoint, I think that early bars are a strange thing. They're the bars that people go to either that want to continue drinking from the night before, or more likely people that are working graveyards.
Just back up for a second. Let's define early bar.
A bar that opens at 6 or 7 o'clock in the morning.
Okay, just making sure.
And it surprises me that there aren't that many of them here
anymore.
Yeah.
There used to be a lot. There also used to be a lot of 24-hour diners, a lot of late-night coffee shops. There used to be more at night here.
Why do you think that's changed?
Oh, that's a whole other show. I have opinions and receipts.
We will have to talk about that.
Sounds good.
Anyway, we will do a goodbye now.
Yeah, because I've got jukebox playing behind us, and I'm going to have a bitch of a time editing out. Thanks to a time machine, our main discussion is mostly music-free.
That is true. And we appreciate the 3 people that came in. And
will be coming in.
And actually created a little different environment than we usually have, because it's usually you and I just talking about things.
And now it's 2 other guys and a nice lady.
Yes.
And you're talking about things.
Yes. So it went well.
And me yelling stuff in the background and walking around.
Well, you were acting like
what's going to happen.
You were the production person today. Usually you do production and participate. Today you just had
I'm still participating. Yeah.
So again, thank you everybody for coming and seeing us. We've seen that our one podcast is up to 14 people.
We'll probably be off next week. Week after, and hopefully our process will congeal a little bit more, and distribution will happen a little faster.
And we will have more interesting guests, because I think we're working on that.
We're also skipping the away mission this month, but November, December, we're definitely going to be doing some travel.
Yep, that sounds good. We can do this? We can do this?
We can do anything.
Okay. You want to go to Indiana or Wisconsin?
Rules,
you want to go to Indiana or Wisconsin?
Go to Canada.
We can do that.
We'll talk.
That would be interesting.
Thanks. I hope you enjoy the next segment. And if you get called for jury duty, go do it. Also, don't be an asshole. Just try. Just try.
Okay, for our main discussion of the day, we have actual people. Usually John and I get put in a position that we just sit and bloviate for an hour and a half, somewhere around in there. And right now, we actually have some more interesting people than us here, and we're going to talk about Chicago Under Siege. So if you could you introduce yourself from the right and come this way?
Okay, I'm Lucinda Cashman. I don't know whether I am partly from Rogers Park, but I spend much of the year in Mexico. So I either have a different perspective or partially not am not here.
Good. Welcome.
My name is Danny Postel. Um, I'm the politics editor of New Lines Magazine, which is a global affairs publication. And I live in Chicago. I've lived here in Rogers Park on and off since 1991, so 34 years now.
Nick Patricca, professor emeritus at Loyola, and I've been in Rogers Park since 1967 as a teacher at Loyola and Mundelein College, and now living here since 2003.
Well, excellent. Now, we're going to have a discussion. A lot of us went to the No Kings this weekend. Uh, and we've all felt that there's something strange going on here because of what Chicago is really like, and it's what it's been, the image that's been created by someone that hasn't even visited here, I think, is part of the problem. But let's talk a little bit about what's been happening with ICE and generally what people think here on the ground as to what's going on.
Well, in early September, the Trump administration launched something called Operation Midway Blitz. And it's basically a militarized descent on Chicago in the name of cracking down on immigrants, um, arresting, detaining, and ultimately deporting immigrants. But I think we should back up even before that to explain that, there was a lot of different messaging from the Trump administration about what exactly they were going to do in Chicago. Before they decided to focus specifically on ICE and rounding up immigrants, Trump was talking about declaring war on Chicago and going after criminals. And in early September, he issued this bizarre social media post with a meme. It was an AI, you might remember this, an AI generated image based on the movie Apocalypse Now.
Yes.
With Trump's face superimposed as the character of Lieutenant Colonel Bill Kilgore, played by Robert Duvall in Francis Ford Coppola's 1978 or 77 movie Apocalypse Now. And, a lot of people will remember that character, Lieutenant Colonel Kilgore, for his line, "I love the smell of napalm in the morning." Well, the Trump version of Lieutenant Colonel Kilgore in this meme says, "I love the smell of deportations in the morning." And then the next line says, "Chicago's about to find out why we call it the Department of War, or why it's called the Department of War in all caps, with 3 helicopter images right next to it." At that time, it hadn't actually, the name of the Department of Defense was just about to be changed to the Department of War. So the point is, the Trump administration was sending a lot of mixed signals about what exactly the plan was. Are we going to go in and round up all the criminals? He kept talking about the homicides, the shootings, the killings in Chicago. Then he wanted to declare war on the city of Chicago. Then he says he loves the smell of deportations in the morning. What exactly is going on here? And for whatever reasons, internal bureaucratic reasons, the thing they landed on, and they talked about deploying National Guard troops here, they finally settled on this thing called Operation Midway Blitz, which would be ICE unleashed on a completely over-the-top scale with massive immigration arrests all throughout the city, in tandem with another thing from Border Patrol, which they call Operation At Large.
There were 2 things about what you brought up that intrigued me. The first being, how you would put smell in with the chop into napalm. I love the smell of deportations. In other words, belittling immigrants and saying they're smelly. The the other the other thing I think that all of us look at is from a statistical standpoint, Chicago is nowhere near as dangerous as it's being portrayed. There are lots of other places, but we have two things I think that intrigue Trump. Number one is our governor, and number two is our mayor. And I think those two people irritate him on a personal level right now.
I wanted to thank you, Danny, and thank you, Joe. The thing that has been my primary concern is the failure of our so-called checks and balances of the three forms of government, the executive, the legislative, and the judicial. And the Congress seems to have entirely given up its proper role in controlling the purse. And a lot of these things cannot be done by the executive if is no funding. And the second thing that concerned me was the judicial. The courts are slow in acting, which is their nature, but most of the time they simply stayed an action until it could go to appeal, and then sometimes even an appeal that was delayed for a further appeal. And the decisions in the Supreme Court were troubling for many reasons. That they did not seem to mind the development of the imperial presidency, which both Democrats and Republicans have been responsible for, and I think primarily going back to Lyndon Johnson. But I guess you could accuse Franklin Delano Roosevelt of doing that as well. But there is, Danny might know this better than I do, but in the use, for example, of the National Guard, federalizing the National Guard, correct me, Danny, if I get this wrong, but I don't think the president really had the power to federalize the National Guard as he has been doing for trumped up reasons, very minor reasons, until the 50s. And I think that came about from some
desegregation.
Yeah, that came about in, I think, around 1956. And that was not stopped. I mean, we have been looking at a history of the development of extreme executive power in the hands of the president. And we've never seen a president who has no shame and really is a thug and who wants to go out after his enemies. And he just doesn't care. There's no consistency here. He's going after the people that annoy him or that threaten him, or he just for the sheer delight of it.
Well, I think you're onto something there, because I think what I say about Trump is we have a executive whose major goal is spite.
Yeah.
He's after people that he thought has laughed at him or done things to him. Specifically people in his own first administration that he's now
Like
basically
Bolton.
indicting.
Yeah.
It's.
He said it explicitly, remember, I am your retribution.
Yes.
And he repeated it. He said it twice. He emphasized it.
What's interesting about that is this. I think too often liberals, and I consider myself to be even a little to the left of liberalism, don't perceive why people support Trump. And my view is most of it is because he's promised that retribution. He's going to get after the people that have belittled you, told you you're all idiots and scum and everything else. And I think the Democratic Party specifically has not reacted to that very well.
Do you want to add anything, Lucina?
Well, I think I'm agreeing with John that it seems to me that the the myth of the Trump supporter is that he's going to do something to hurt the people they hate, and that the rest of the government is not of any importance. It's a question of their personal feelings, of whether they are somehow justified. And I can't prove this, but that's what I use to understand how otherwise people seem to do things which are completely against their own interests, which is really mysterious, and even with any kind of help. Uh, I do not know why people are. And this is not the only time that a country has gone crazy and begun to do things that were completely against their interests. Brexit is another example of people simply going bananas, and now they're paying the price, and they can't understand what they were doing exactly. And too bad.
Yeah, I think Nick did get to the core of it when he said that in some ways it's for the pure fun of it. I mean, you can see this, all the things that horrify most Chicagoans, let's say, you know, the commando style raids on buildings, zip tying children, and putting them out on a lawn for several hours, separated from their parents in the middle of the night. Um, using the military force throughout the city, using tear gas against protesters, shooting a pastor
In the
who
face.
was praying in the head with a pepper ball, and then laughing about it. By the way, the pastor has said he heard the ICE agents who shot him from a rooftop. He heard them laughing after they shot him in the head and saw him fall to the ground. There is, I think, and then if you also can, with that image, that AI generated meme that I talked about a few minutes ago, the Shy Apocalypse Now meme, if you put all these things together, there's no avoiding the fact that there is a sadistic quality about this, and that they're very proud of these things. They're making their own videos. The Department of Homeland Security actually sends video film crews on the raids and makes their own films of the same exact things that we find horrifying, that most people find horrifying, and they edit them in this highly stylized way so as to create a kind of entertainment. I mean, there's a long history of this actually in fascist regimes. Nazi Germany had similar, the aestheticization of power is something that does appeal to a lot of people, and I think we have to confront that a lot of our fellow Americans, not only, it's not that they support the administration despite these things, they support the administration because of these things. There is a joy, a pleasure, a thrill that people get out of degrading, humiliating, and belittling others.
These are masters of social media. Danny, I've been flabbergasted that the Democrats have not been able to understand that Trump is a cunning, and he understands social media. That they use social media, they understand the attention span is about 15 seconds, and they do it. They do it perfectly. So the other thing I want to focus on some among us to discuss is the failure of the traditional conservative. I mean, conservatism is built on the principle that no one should be subject to arbitrary power. It's built on the limitation of government. It is built on the idea that the police, a police state, is antithetical to the whole idea of the conservative premise of a republic. And it seems to me that the people who call themselves conservatives in the Congress, the current Congress, are nothing about that. It makes me believe, and perhaps I'm naive, that a lot of this is distraction. Danny used the term spectacle, that this is spectacle theater, and that what's really going on is a grab for power for the long term and a grab for money. so that the two things that keep them together are money and power. And there's the third ingredient, which I hope Joe and John will do another podcast on in the future, is on the Christian nationalists joining this group, because it's not only a grab for power and money, but it's also a grab in the name of the Christian God, which is very hard to understand.
We've actually had a little discussion of that. Yeah, and the upshot of that was I asked a question. The problem with saying that is, what Christian? The people that are asking that question generally are fundamentalists, and they would be abhorrent if someone said, "Well, we're going to pick the Roman Catholic Church as
that's
the
true,
leading."
But yes and no. I want to say that I study religion all the time, and it's not. The Catholics in the United States have been complicit in the triumph of Trump. And they are not Christian nationalists. It's much more complicated than that. And the other factor is that charismatics voted solidly for Trump. They are not Christian nationalists by and large, and for the most part. So the question is why? And it's a very deep question. And because I think some of them, it's about protecting the family. And now that is often used. Mussolini used that. That's used by authoritarian. And then the other thing is gender. I think the Democrats have been very stupid about how they understand the gender issue. And they have to learn how to explain to people what they're really talking about. And it should never be, the primary policy issue. It should be part of a general public health issue.
No, it's an individual freedom issue.
Yes, and it's about human sexuality. Human sexuality is essential to this conversation. For the Christians I'm talking about, it's certainly essential in the Catholic Church, and it's essential in the charismatics. I tried to warn people when I walked through the park. I talked to many men, especially, and they all were puzzled by what was happening. They took a lot of the conversation that Democratic politicians were having as a serious attack on the family, and as a serious attack on their relationships between the sexes. And I think that we can't ignore that.
One of the things you brought up was the attack on the apartment building. And I think one of the things that struck me about that was it was a total Fourth Amendment issue. They basically went in and just busted all the doors down everywhere of people that weren't there, of people that they weren't supposed to be getting after in the first place. And even generally, the description of we're going to get rid of criminals, and then they define criminals as someone that's had a speeding ticket or something stupid like that. It seems
and confusing misdemeanors for felonies.
It disheartens me to see what the judiciary is doing for the most part. There are some people that are standing up, but the Ninth Circuit just said that they could bring troops into Portland today. When which circuit is ours? I'm not used to the Middle East. That is basically upheld that they can't bring them into Chicago. They can put them into barracks, but they can't bring them in.
But it's at the Supreme Court now, and I would predict that they'll probably rule in favor of the Trump administration because they tend to do that.
I would assume so. But see, it's a psychosis. You've got the entire cadre of conservatives on the Supreme Court that say that they're strict constructionalists, but then end up doing things that are just completely wacko.
Yeah, well, they're not. They're not even originalists because Madison would have to bring them back to school.
Yeah, there's a journalist for the Atlantic magazine, whose name I'm forgetting right now, who wrote a great book about the Republican Party in the age of Trump with the title, "Thank You for Your Servitude." I think that pretty much sums it up. But the Republican Party, Nick is right that there's been a spectacular failure of traditional conservatives, which is a worldview that I don't share, but that I take seriously. There are serious conservative thinkers, political theorists, who, some of whom have spoken up against Trump. I mean, David French in the New York Times is somebody who...
Well, even Karl Rove has tried.
Yeah, I mean, he's more of an operator than a thinker. But yes, I mean, look, there was the Lincoln Project. There's the Bulwark. There's all these, the never Trump Republicans. That's pretty much over now because
they lost.
Trump consolidated, and the Republican Party, it is his party now. It's a thoroughly MAGA-fied party, and traditional conservatives either just left the party and they conceded, they threw in the flag, or they are the ones in Congress, the elected ones, have mostly just caved in. Thank you for your servitude, because they're afraid. I mean, basically, it's political suicide at this point to be an elected official in the Republican Party in today's America and not be pro-Trump. I mean, even if you try to distance yourself in the slightest, most subtle way, he'll go after you. And it's not just that you'd be committing political suicide. You would have the MAGA mafia after you, death threats. Your life can become a living hell. That's the situation we're in.
They've managed to paint the. Let me back up. What they want to say is that they're after the drug cartels. That the drug cartels are the people who are bringing the illegal, undocumented people across the border. So they claim that they're doing this to strike down the drug cartel, and that by our mayor and our governor resisting that, they are actually cooperating with the drug cartels, or they're against this lawful enforcement. They're so good at that it plays in the country. It might not play in Chicago, but people in the country actually begin to ask questions like, well, why don't they let them go after the drug cartels? And you're just naive if you don't think that the drug cartels are controlling Pilsen. Well, people who live in other areas of the United States don't necessarily understand what it means to live in a city. And there's a profound difference if you grew up in the city or if you grew up in a small town. They're just very different economic and social politics. Body politic is different. And I think that the failure here on all sides is just not among conservatives. The Democratic Party has not presented a program that has equal appeal or that can counter what Trump and his people are doing. There's no powerful statement of what the Democrats represent. And it's even hard for someone like Pritzker, who's quite eloquent, to articulate what he's defending. It's become very hard to state something positive.
Yeah, I think at this moment, the main argument is against what Trump and his administration are doing to our city, to our state, to our communities.
That's not a winning position, is what I'm trying to say.
Right.
That's pure defense, and it won't work.
Yeah, even the No Kings protests, which were some of the largest demonstrations in U.S. history, which happened just less than 48 hours ago. That was even the name of it, No Kings, right?
It's unfortunate. The name is unfortunate because it's negative. We need to find some way forward that's positive. Yes.
And for example, look at how they can tear apart Mandami, the socialist, socialist mayoral candidate. I have no opinion about him, whether you're for or against it. That's not the issue. The issue is, look at how they have already got a tremendous juggernaut of social media destroying him.
Yes.
And labeling everyone who is sympathetic to what he says, as socialist. And socialist is a dirty word in the United States. You can't use it neutrally.
It's a little bit less dirty than it used to be because of the end of the Cold War. So our generation...
And Bernie.
And Bernie, who himself was very much, became... He was a Cold War era figure who became the mayor of Burlington, Vermont in the early 1980s. But until the end of the Cold War, it was very much a burden that the S word was something that one avoided.
Yep.
Or had to explain, and when you have to explain what you're not, I'm not talking about the Soviet Union. We don't want that. We don't want China-style socialism. We want this other thing that's hard to explain. Okay, you've lost the argument. But the interesting thing is that younger people like Zoran Mamdani and the young volunteers for his campaign and people who are out in the streets and prepared to vote for him in New York, they don't have the same historical baggage that the Soviet Union is something from the very distant past for them, and thanks partly to Bernie Sanders campaigns in 2016 and 2020, that stigma doesn't have the same weight, and I think you're right, Nick, that there's this huge smear campaign against Zoran from not only from the Trump administration, certainly. I mean, he's threatened Cuomo. I mean, the establishment of the Democratic Party has gone after him. But here's the interesting thing. It's not working.
Yeah.
He's ahead 15 to 20 points in the polls. He's going to win.
But that's working in New York City. That's not, but my point is it's working in the country. The attack on him is working in the country, and that's what is about the next election.
What I want to sort of talk about, I think, where you're moving with this. And one of the things I've been thinking about is one of the reasons Trump is successful is my father and my wife's father are dead. They fought fascism during World War II. And there's no almost archetypal memory of what fascism really is that exists in the country right now. There's no memory of what the Depression used to be like and what FDR did to pull us out of that. And the safeguards that continually get reduced every year due to conservative movements at the federal level. So
I'm reading this book by Comer, who is a professor at the University of Siena, and he's written a monograph on the Mussolini and the rehabilitation of Mussolini in Italy. That it's a fascinating work. I don't recommend you read it because it's too academic, and he writes like an academic. But I'll tell you, basically, the premise is very fascinating. That the rehabilitation that put Melania back into power is because of this amnesia that you're talking about.
Yeah.
That the young people don't have the knowledge of World War II. They don't have the knowledge of living under fascism. They are now looking at the inability of Italy to govern itself. And they're thinking, Mussolini had a point. You need a tough guy. You need a strong leader. You need someone who can give you orders so you can have business, so you can have safety, you can have security in the street, and you can run a business, and you can pursue a career. And these are basic. And again, that they are whitewashing Mussolini. They're saying, well, he only made 2 mistakes. That's what they say. He went with Hitler and he rounded up the Jews. Those were the only 2 mistakes he made.
Well, what he did in Africa didn't matter at all.
They forget that part. But my point is that of all the authoritarian dictatorships that we have witnessed, Mussolini wrote the primer for that. He wrote the primer for Hitler, and he wrote the primer for Franco. And it's very simple, and it's been said in the press 1,000 times. Danny has written about the primer. It's basic. It says this is what you do first, this is what you do. And that is what Trump has done. So no one can plead ignorance. It's right there.
Yes, and Trump himself actually ran on that in the second instance. Not as much in 2016, but especially in 2024, his third run for president. He really leaned into this authoritarian stuff, talking about, he promised pretty much everything that's happening right now.
Yeah,
he said, we're going to undertake the largest roundup and deportation of undocumented immigrants in American history. We are going, and he said, immigrants poison the blood of our country. I mean, what kind of language is that?
That goes back.
That's
is so
straight
old.
out of the fascist Nazi playbook.
Which they got from us.
Well, that's also true. The Nazis were heavily influenced
by
by
our eugenic movement.
Yes, and by Jim Crow and by American racism.
Kellogg's cereal.
Yes, and there's a lot. It's a two-way street. There's no question that Nazi Germany learned and was inspired by things about the American system. In part, are the extermination of Native Americans, and in part the Jim Crow and racism in this country. But also, there are American fascists who are very influenced by the European version of it. But what I'm trying to say is, everything that the Trump administration is doing right now was pretty much advertised in the campaign.
Yes.
No, there's nobody who voted for Trump can say, well, I didn't know he was going to do this. Well, if you didn't, you either had your head in the sand, or in a body part, or you chose not to hear what he was saying, because he spelled it all out.
In fact, a lot of his supporters say he's a politician who actually does what he says he's going to do.
There you go.
Well, I was just going to sort of get into this, because if you look at history, there's a progression with democracies, and that is they progress until the government doesn't work anymore.
That's right.
And then they fall into a totalitarian situation.
Absolutely.
Clear back to Greece, Rome, anything that you can think of. And I think one of the problems I have as an ex-politician is the government really isn't working very well right now, because you have a conservative party that wants to make sure it doesn't work, and you have a Democratic Party that is so empathetic they don't want to perturb anyone, and therefore can't get anything done either. That's at least my perception of things. And that failure that we've seen has been the thing that has strengthened Trump.
Yes.
The government doesn't work. They're doing things you don't like. Blah 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 blah. That this is the reason you should vote for me, because I will be your vengeance. And what you talked about earlier is the fact that we will take care of everything. He said during the election, after this election, we won't need another one.
That's
right.
He said.
I mean,
and that, I think we should take statements like that somewhat seriously, if not literally. I mean, it's hard to know exactly what he means by some of this stuff. He kind of, which is part of his appeal, right? He free associates.
Totally.
He just gives you this. It's like this discharge from his brain.
The
there's no filter.
The Republicans have done this since Reagan. Throw stuff out and see what happens. We'll say something outrageous, and if no one says anything, we'll do it.
I think it's
It plays.
Yes.
I think Trump has taken it to the next level, though. The Reagan Republicans, as problematic as they were, they didn't talk about ending democracy. They didn't talk about no elections will be necessary. Now, here's the interesting thing. We don't know what kind of scheming is going on for 2028.
That's right.
That's actually quite a long way off right now, which is scary. This is 3 long years now. But what we do know is that, Trump certainly won't have to run for president again.
No.
He will either try to squat and refuse to leave office and cancel elections, or he will simply have to step down and hope and maybe hand it over to he'll anoint J.D. Vance or someone like that as his
Putin
successor.
As Putin
right,
did.
but
And then come back.
Well, Trump could actually serve as vice president. There's all sorts of
Oh no,
schemes.
I don't think he can. Because
No, that's right, because a vice president has to be prepared to be president.
Right. He could be Secretary of State or something like that.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, but the point is,
Or Speaker of the House.
but he doesn't have. Well, he would have to be elected to Congress. then.
You do
Oh,
not
that's
have
right.
to
No,
be.
you don't have to.
You don't have to be elected to Congress to be Speaker
anyone
of the
can
House?
be Speaker of the House. The Congress can elect
That's interesting.
anyone. They can elect you, me,
I should know that.
Lucina.
I'm the politics editor.
There you go.
I didn't know that.
Oh yeah.
Or if I did, I
Uh-oh.
forgot.
I've been
One
waiting.
You
one
can edit
demerit.
that part out.
Oh, no. Everything's
One
safe
demerit.
thus far. However, I'm going
We're
to take
done?
this moment. No. I'm your bartender right now. Does
Oh.
anybody need anything?
No, I think we're
This
getting
one's going to
close.
be on me. So.
We're close to the end.
Would you like another?
Sure.
Are you okay?
Yes, please.
I'm fine,
Okay.
thanks. No, I still want to look at David Brooks is a conservative, and as is David French, and these are conservatives who are thoughtful and understand the horror of Trump. I still don't see them persuading many people to vote for a positive program that will try to, first of all, stop what's going on and articulate a vision of what should be going on. I think we need to strengthen. The Congress has to recover its backbone and start to control what it should control. And we need to look to that as the first check.
Well, the whole thing is broken down. Trump is in a position that he's doing things that the founding fathers never believed you would do. You would never, as a president, say, well, I've got the Marshal Service and all the effective people to do things.
Some saw it and tried to stop that.
Yeah. But that's the frightening thing. He's able just to say, I'm not going to pay attention to the courts. And most of the time the courts now are siding with him in a lot of instances because of the basic appointees that he's put in. So that's the most frightening thing to me, is that the other portions of government, even if they did the right thing, he does not recognize as president, I'm supposed to execute the laws that are passed.
Even if the Supreme Court, even if the courts objected or said no, they have no police power.
Exactly.
And because they have no police power, we really don't have a government that has 3 checks and balances. We don't have it. And I think that we've got to recover that. I really do think that's the core issue here. You're the political editor. What do you think?
I think that one thing Trumpism has revealed, and this is quite healthy actually, is that those kinds of considerations, checks and balances, constitutionalism, the stuff that you described as like the thoughtful conservatism of a David Brooks and these types of people, that was always a thin veneer that just, it was an overlay that was there sort of as a coating for American conservatism, but it wasn't actually what was driving it. And what Trump has done is he's clarified what's actually going on. Trump's views on various issues are much closer to the base of the Republican Party than to the elites. I'll give you just 2 examples. I mean, Trump's position on immigration, which is, I think, the number one issue. It's the core. That's why we're dealing with Operation Midway Blitz right now and the icification of American cities right now, is that immigration is the number one issue. Remember, I attended a Trump rally in Racine, Wisconsin in the summer of 2024. And man, I will never forget the thunderous, I mean, the biggest thing, the thing that got the most resounding response from the audience was the immigration talk about sending the rapists and criminals and people who escaped from asylums back. And the crowd would actually interrupt him and start thundering, "Send them back. Send them back." It would go on and on and on. He would actually have to quiet them down to get on with the rest of his speech. This is a base issue. There are people in the party that want mass deportations. It is a visceral, emotional issue. And the majority of the Republican Party is on Trump's side. But for years, Reagan was pro-immigration.
Yes.
George Bush the father, George Bush the son. They were basic, and John McCain and Mitt Romney, who
the
got
Wall Street Journal,
of the establishment of the Republican Party, the business conservatives,
the agribusiness.
Well,
they all want the cheap labor. They are not in favor of deportations. But Trump flipped the script within the Republican Party on this, because he was the first one to actually be viable at the presidential level who had the views he did. And what you discovered was these are actually the majority of, this is the majority view in the Republican Party at
It
the
is.
base level.
It is, but see, the thing that strikes me about that is in red states, the people that are illegal are picking the food or working in the meat packing plants and all sorts of things like that that other people don't want to do. And this has been created because both parties have not wanted to put in true immigration reform.
That's right.
The Democrats have not really pushed it. The Republicans don't want to push it because it's a great political issue for them.
John McCain was one of the sponsors of the.
But they couldn't get it. They couldn't get it passed.
Right.
And I'm old. I can remember when there was a Bracero program where they actually had a situation where they would contract with people that they were protected. They had good housing. They were protected as far as getting their money and everything else. And the growers hated it.
Yeah.
They hated it because they had to provide housing.
Yeah.
They hated it because they had to pay them a living wage.
Exactly.
And that disappeared because of conservatives.
Let me give you something that I only learned 2 years ago. Mexicans cross the border. Anyone, you could cross the border between the United States and Mexico without any problems, one way or the other.
For hundreds of years.
Yeah, for hundreds of years until 1965.
Yeah.
It was the Civil Rights Bill. In order to get the Civil Rights Bill passed, Lyndon Johnson agreed, for the first time in history, that there would be migration control at our border with Mexico, and there would be a limit on the number of Mexicans who could. No one knows that. I mean, it's 65.
Well, even going back further than that, the Border Patrol was created to keep the Chinese out.
Yes, it was a Chinese.
There were hundreds of years that the Hispanics were able to cross the border because there was an economic issue. There was trade going on there and everything else.
In fact, a friend of mine is giving a talk today as we speak, in which she says why her family decided they would leave New Orleans and move to California. Because in California, the discrimination was against the Chinese. I mean, it's a very interesting fact that we've had a shifting focus of the idea of racism. But it all goes back to the original, you might say the original sin, which was when the South equated color of skin with slavery.
Oh, that's such a sad issue at this point. In my church now, there are some randomly placed cardboard people who are there representing the people who are too afraid to leave their houses to go to church and have to be represented. This to me is, what has happened to freedom of religion? What has happened to anything, any kind of human decency?
Well, we've talked about,
and particularly if you look at Hispanic, and that is things have not for a long time not been completely color in that way, but now. We had a situation this summer where a lot of my relatives were meeting to go to the Huasteca Potosina in San Luis Potosí to play in the Cascades, in the waterfalls. But one of my nephews was going to invite his friend, Joaquin, that everybody known for a long time. But Joaquin's parents said, "No, we're not letting you go. You are named Joaquin and you look Mexican." So this nephew had to find a friend who was blonde and invite him. Now this is totally disgraceful.
Well, and one of the things we've seen here, I live on Lund Lake where Nick lives, and we've seen this summer as soon as Midway Blitz occurred, it, the park being empty on weekends. Whereas in the past 5 years, on Saturday and Sunday, families come in droves to to recreate and have a good time, and they're just scared now. They're scared to do anything.
Now they're ashamed or embarrassed for their skin. This is so gross. I just cannot underscore it with sufficient strength.
It's affecting not only people going out in a recreational sense into public spaces. It's affecting a lot of them are not going to work.
So they can't pay their bills.
A lot of them are not going grocery shopping. Because the workplaces and grocery stores, especially Mexican grocery stores, right, or ethnic immigrant grocery stores, these are targets. ICE knows, they're not stupid. They know exactly where to find large concentrations of people, so they avoid these places. Of course, schools are really sitting targets because you can't avoid. The school is a fixed location where your kid goes or your kids go, and it starts at a certain time every day and it ends at a certain time every day. So the parents are there. So now you have a lot of kids are staying home from school. Parents are keeping their kids home from school. And we know what effect this has. We don't have to speculate, because back in 2018, during the first Trump administration, there was a similar program between the Department of Homeland Security and various police forces, law enforcement bodies across the country, local agencies, and they were, cooperating on immigration enforcement. And a lot of kids stayed home from school, and there was a lot more anxiety. There was children were not eating, they were not sleeping. There was mental health problems. So we know this. We don't need to speculate or wonder what's going to happen. We've seen this movie before. And the other thing to emphasize is, like I was saying earlier, that there are these divisions within the Republican Party over immigration policy, right? This is bad for business. I mean, this is not just bad for immigrants, which it certainly is, obviously. But it's actually like a lot of the growers are pleading with the Trump administration, stop this. Remember the video came out of the ICE agents literally chasing farm workers through the fields. And Trump actually saw this video and said, this is not good. Not because his heart goes out to the workers, but because this brings up this contradiction between the free market wing of the Republican Party, which wants cheap labor. They do not want these workers deported. And the nativist, xenophobic, anti-immigrant, racist wing of the Republican Party that wants to expel these people. This is a real tension. This is actually bad for business that there are not people out. Have you been down to Pilsen?
So why is the stock market booming?
Well, that's actually a really good question.
Because of AI.
Yeah, but it's an interesting question that brings me back to my original statement, is that there are moneyed interests here, and I don't want to sound like one of those conspiracy theorists, but there's money interests here that are making money. How are they making money? I think we need to look at that.
We could have another discussion about the fascistic nature of Silicon Valley now, too.
Yes, and also, why do they want to be immortal?
So you're right that there is an economic dimension of this. There is something. Some scholars call it the deportation industrial complex. There's a historian here in Chicago at UIC, Adam Goodman, who has a book called The Deportation Machine.
Oh, sure, I know.
Where it's a very interesting book that I relied on for my own reporting.
Yeah.
But Adam Goodman talks about how, there is this machinery of deportation, and there are contracts. A lot of this work is being subcontracted. On the other hand, we haven't seen, there hasn't been mass deportation yet. The ICE repressive apparatus is just getting going. They're just making arrests and detention. They're detaining people. They haven't really started deporting people on a mass scale. They're hoping that people self-deport. But I think when you see if they actually are able to deport,
that has worked to an extent.
Well,
the border crossings are way down.
yes.
I think symbolically, when Trump leaves office, we should give him $1,000 in a ticket someplace.
Well, one of the things I'm hopeful about, and I'm rarely hopeful, is that the leadership of the Catholic Church in Rome is very, very much leaning on the U.S. bishops, who have been by and large, I won't say this, by and large.
You can swear.
No, I'm not.
You can swear.
By and large, supportive, unfortunately, of Trump and the Republican Party, solely because of their exclusive focus, twisted, distorted focus on one item of abortion. But they seem to have forgotten the whole social gospel, social justice teachings of the Catholic Church. If the Leo did ask them to be unified on the issue of migrants, they were so organized about abortion. If they were equally organized on this question, you would see cracks in the Republican Party.
Yes, they're behaving at this point, the Catholic hierarchy, and I really hope that their institutions hold. The civil institutions, the non-religious ones, the laic, what is laico?
Secular.
The secular institutions didn't.
But they aren't as organized as they were about abortion.
Yeah,
they were really militant, and they are not like that on this issue, which I think.
Not yet, anyway, but maybe.
I mean, if you're going to take pro-life seriously, you have to take it seriously across the board.
Well,
I don't want to talk about that.
who was it
that's the issue?
Who was it? I think it was George Bernard Shaw that said consistency is the hobgoblin of small minds.
Well, it's a funny line, but there's actually something to it in this respect, which is, we're talking about consistency and both, on what should be and what, the inconsistencies in the Trump administration and so forth. But the truth is that most people don't vote based on a sort of what many of us would consider a consistent ideological narrative or worldview. You look at how people actually, like ordinary people who are not activists, who are not intellectuals, who are not political junkies, which is actually, if you add up all those groups, it's like, what, 5-10% of the U.S. population or less. So like 95 or 90% of people, they don't think in these terms where you have to be, where everything coheres and your views align perfectly with one side or the other or any particular worldview. It's like people just go with their gut.
Yeah, that's true.
And what affects them? What affects them?
The thing that I'm looking at is that the ability to reason through to a complex argument is partly the issue. And you're right, I think most people go by their gut. But you have to look at how it's the old thing about how come all the people in Kansas vote against themselves. I mean, if you look at the map, for example, on the healthcare issue, on subsidies for healthcare, if you look at the map, the states that would be most hurt by the fact that we don't have subsidies are all in the South.
And red states generally.
Yeah, those are the states that are receiving overwhelmingly the most money and support. And when they did interview some people in Appalachia, they said, well, we're used to suffering. We'll have a little more pain. That is self-destruction in a way that has been accepted because of the belief that they are hurting, as Lucinda said at the beginning, they are hurting their enemies somewhere else.
Yeah, that's the trade-off. That's the payoff, and it's worth it to some people apparently. But the Steve Bannon and others in the MAGA world are very attuned to this, and they've warned. They warned the Trump administration, especially when Elon Musk was around.
Yeah.
Bannon said repeatedly, be careful with Medicaid. There's a lot of MAGA on Medicaid. We cannot throw millions of MAGA folks off of Medicaid. Notice he didn't say we can't throw a lot of poor people off of Medicaid. He said we can't. A lot of MAGA is on Medicaid, but he's right about that. And that is another contradiction of Trumpism. Remember that when Trump ran in 2015, 2016, he ran partly against pure free market capitalism.
Absolutely.
He actually promised that he would never get rid of Medicare and Medicaid, Social Security. He said, look, we don't want to touch this. And there is a tradition in right-wing populist parties across Europe, for example, of being pro-worker for native workers, not
Absolutely.
immigrant workers.
It's part of fascism.
It's part of fascism. It's part of
standard.
right-wing populism. Marine
And
Le Pen's party.
the person who wrote the book on that was Bismarck.
Yes, there's a strong. Actually, we forget this. There was a workerist current within National Socialism, within the Nazi
But
Party.
I mean, Bismarck co-opted communism and socialism by putting in very strong pro-labor programs, which exist till this day.
And Trump has not done that.
No,
Trump has not
no.
been pro-labor, and he has not. He's now, especially with the so-called Big Beautiful Bill, he's throwing a lot of people off of Medicaid and Medicare and slashing social safety nets.
So does the point of pain go to move people to think and feel differently?
I would not hold my breath.
Yeah.
And I do not, I used to think that people were voting against their interests. Like, what's the matter with Kansas? Why are poor people voting for politicians who screw them over on economic policy? I used to think that, but I think that there are some problematic assumptions in that I don't buy into anymore. What are people's true interests? Is that really something that we can divine or determine objectively? Who's to say that people's interests are purely material? I mean, in the Vietnam War, for example, the students who refused to serve, who protested against the Vietnam War, they were in many ways they were acting not on their material interests, but in their
There was a moral thing.
There was it was
spiritual.
Yeah, it was a moral and there was an idealist quality to their rejection of the system that they were poised to benefit from. They were going to college. They could have taken their place in the machinery of upper middle class America and done very well for themselves.
I do think this is a spiritual crisis, and I think that we can. I think that we can get. I think the Democrats in general, again, fail to appreciate the power of religion in the United States. And I think people have given up a lot on institutional and organized religion, but they're very, very much into spirituality. And I think that you can see it on the college campuses. And it's a very powerful movement. And if they don't use it properly, it will be exploited by Trump and others.
See, the period of time you're talking about was when I was in college. So the interesting thing from my perspective was I don't know of anyone in college that time that was looking at college as a vocational experience.
Right.
Whereas now, I mean, if you look at colleges now, it is almost purely vocational.
100%.
We went to school thinking we want to become well-rounded people that can learn and can change throughout their lives and that sort of thing.
Money is one.
And,
You're right.
And part of this is because our parents, who never went to college, were World War II people that knew the value of education, invested in it.
That's right.
In California, for example, it went from 11% of the state's budget in higher education to 3%. And at the same time, the prisons went from 3% to 11%. So they have invested in the last 30 years or so in prisons
And
rather
you had
than
a great
education.
educational system.
For reasonable money.
Yeah.
Community colleges were free.
New York City
Yeah.
and California had really great systems.
And the Silicon Valley revolution, the things that have come out of California are the result of that educational system. And that has been destroyed, even in California.
It's
now.
true. Yes, it's true. I want to thank everybody. I mean, I just think this is a great conversation. Thank you, John, for keeping us all audible.
Wanya?
Your wife left you, apparently. Sorry that you had to learn in the middle of a podcast episode.
Thank you guys so much.
Yes, we appreciate it.
Thank you.
We should come back on another thing.
That's good.
You should have grabbed a mic and argued with us
just get in
now.
there.
Why wait? Okay, which part? I'm curious now. Which part did you want to argue with? If I had known, I would have ordered something a stiffer drink. I hear you. Some other time. That's all right. You'll hear it. Good times. Hey, you had an excuse. You had an excuse.
Thank you very much.
Hey,
Stan.
it was fun. I enjoyed it.
We will try and get some things.